when you come to fasting, you think of one thing. You think of hunger. And unfortunately, that's sometimes not the only thing that we experience as a side effect for fasting. But I think most people will find that even though there are some other things that are a little uncomfortable with fasting, they're worth the trade. They're worth what you get in trade for the benefit from fasting.
Welcome to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. This is Coach Terri Lance, and I am joined today with the amazing Coach Heather. Heather, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Terri. Thanks for asking.
Well, Heather, one of the things that listeners might not know is that sometimes we get together to record and we are both still pondering, what should we talk about? What do people need to know? So I was thinking as we were leading into this that sometimes people seem to think that we as coaches find all of this very easy. We had a swimmingly simple time doing our fasting and going through our health goals and our weight loss journey, and that now we just expect that it should be simple for all of them. And I think in our recent Coaches Corner meeting, we've really tried to highlight it was not simple for any of us either. And I thought, Heather, today maybe we could talk a little bit about what were some of our struggles along the way in our journey so that people can hear that we too are human just like them and struggled and also had to figure out some ways to get through those challenges.
You know, it's funny when you brought up this topic, Terri, because I was like, no, I didn't have any problems whatsoever because my memory is so short. And then with just a few moments of reflection, I was like, oh, wait, that's right. I did have all of these things that we talk about. So I think that's a fantastic topic because, you know, when you come to fasting, you think of one thing. You think of hunger. And unfortunately, that's sometimes not the only thing that we experience as a side effect for fasting. But I think most people will find that even though there are some other things that are a little uncomfortable with fasting, they're worth the trade. They're worth what you get in trade for the benefit from fasting.
Absolutely. Which I think is part of why you had that little bit of amnesia about what were the challenges. You know, isn't that why most women are able to have a second child because they forget that actual experience? So, Heather, I was thinking, you just mentioned hunger. And for me, that's an interesting one because I don't even think in the beginning actual hunger was the issue for me, because I think for me, it was because I was pretty well dialed in already in a low carb approach to eating. I think I was pretty well fat adapted. But for me, it was, I missed eating. I missed tasting something. I missed the frequent enjoyment of food that I was so used to. So for me, it wasn't actual physical hunger, but it was that, like, I'm missing out on something because I'm not eating. Not just, I'm not eating those meals, but I'm not snacking. I'm not, just constantly kind of going for food as my go-to focus. So for me, that was one of my biggest challenges as I got started, is getting used to spending time without having food.
And that's interesting because I would even say that for me, it wasn't the hunger sensation either. After I started getting into fasting, it was absolutely more the fear of hunger. I was afraid of it. So before I started fasting, I was a recovery room nurse, and whenever it was lunchtime and we were super busy, my coworkers would coordinate and organize to make sure at least I got to lunch because I got so miserable when I was hungry. It's a true story. So, the idea that I would intentionally put that on myself and choose to have that experience regularly, it took me a long time to even accept that that is something that I'd be willing to do. And even once I started fasting, the evening before a 42-hour fast, so I'm going to, I know I'm not going to eat the next day. At that dinner, I would sometimes think, oh no, I'm going to feel hungry tomorrow. And sometimes, and I did this, and I know some of my clients do too, were like, well, I better reinforce my storage, right? I better eat more in preparation so I'll be ready, which is, of course, counterproductive to our goals of weight loss. So that getting over that fear was actually more difficult than the actual real life experience of feeling hunger.
I can so relate to that. And as you mentioned, with clients and community members and listeners, I know that some people do experience the actual physical hunger. And a couple of thoughts I had as you were just talking is one, dialing in your relationship with food, I think is a big helper with avoiding some of the hunger, but recognizing too that hunger waves are natural. Using electrolytes, I think, was a big key for me at some points and others. Even though it wasn't for me physical hunger, even just having some salt took my mind off of it, satisfied something. Several years ago, when I was hosting a couple of fasting retreats for the fasting method, one of the members utilized this strategy so naturally, it kind of surprised me. But we were driving across the island and we were going to a volcano and we're all excited. And it was our first long day of a fast. I was sitting in the way back with everyone's bags and she had her little salt container in her bag. So I swear it was like every 15 minutes she would say, "Terri, can you grab my bag?" And I'd grab her bag and she said, "Could you get my salt container out of there?" And I would get the salt container and hand it to her. And then she would hand it back. Finally, one of the other members said, "Why do you keep asking her for the salt?" And she said, "Every time I think I'm hungry, I just put some more salt on my tongue and it stops." Now, at first for her, it was every 15 minutes. But I noticed as the week went on, she wasn't having to do that quite as frequently. So having some tools that help you navigate the waves of hunger. For some people, suppressing their hunger a little bit with tea, the catechins can help alleviate some of that. For me, also sparkling water, I think is a helpful tool because it makes me have a little bit more of a sensation of something is in my belly.
I too was a big fan of the sparkling water, but interestingly, yes, it definitely gave me that sensation of something in my belly, but also I was working in primary care when I was doing my therapeutic fasting, and I'm in this room, quiet room with one other person, and my stomach would just be acrobatics. There were all kinds of noise and gurgles, and it was, I could hear it, they could hear it, they're looking at me. And I found that using sparkling water kind of calmed that down and made it less noisy. So I was notoriously sipping on seltzer water all day long for that issue and the hydration and the feeling. So it covered a lot of things.
I love it. I love it. What other things did you notice, especially maybe as you got started with fasting and as you really built up to that therapeutic level? Any other things that kind of surprised you or made it more challenging?
It's funny, when you first talked about the side effects that we experienced in our own story, I was like, I can't remember. And then I remember at the very beginning, I was so cold all the time, freezing cold. And I started my fasting journey at the end of April. So I was fasting through summer. There was no reason for me to be cold and I was freezing. I actually have this little sauna in my house. And in summer, I would sit in that thing and crank up the heat in order to feel warm. And that was especially interesting for me because as someone who was overweight for a really long time, I used to say that my superpower was I always had hot hands, right? If my kids were cold, I would put my hands on their face or over their hands to warm them up. And then I lost that superpower. I had ice cold hands. So again, worth the trade. I certainly wouldn't give up, my healthier body for my hot hands, but that was definitely something, at least in those first couple months, really, I had that experience of extreme coldness a lot.
I hadn't really thought about that one for me, but I started fasting in October and I lived in Ohio at the time. So I fasted late fall and through winter. And I remember almost being a little excited because it justified all of the turtlenecks and long johns that I had been saving for years and years and years, because I suddenly had a really good use for them. And during my longer fasts, I would just layer up. I would have a base layer on of long johns. I would have a layer of sweatpants, sometimes 2 sweatpants. And then if I was going to be, let's say, sitting down watching TV or something, I also had a blanket on. So it got all the old blankets out of the linen closet. So for me, it fit seasonally. So at least I wasn't the only person walking around in turtlenecks and multiple layers. But it really gave me an opportunity, like I said, to justify all of those winter clothes that I had hung onto when no one else was using them.
Hi, this is Dr. Nadia, and I am so excited to be hosting the Fat Fast Masterclass once again. This is a 3-day masterclass. On day 1, we will be talking about what is a fat fast and why is it so effective. On day 2, I will go over how to fat fast with you. I will be giving you a omnivore fat fast list and a vegan plant-based fat fast list. And on day 3, we will be finally talking about when to fat fast. I will also be with you for 3 live Q&As where I will answer all of your questions, as well as join you in the exclusive forum where we can chat daily. I am so excited to go over what to eat with you and why fat fasting is the most appropriate fast mimicking diet. See you there.
Okay, so we've gone over hunger and missing food. We've gone over the gurgly stomach and the coldness, the loss of hot hands. Another one for me at first was just navigating the scheduling of it. I was pretty strict about doing 3 days a week. I was working with Megan as my coach, and that's what she had told me to do. And so, come hell or high water, I was going to get 3 fasts in a week. And so at first it did make it a little challenging for me to figure out, when will I spend time with other people? When will I schedule a happy hour? When will I schedule a dinner or things? So it did require me to make some adjustments until I realized, and this scares some people to even imagine, but I realized I could go out with people and not eat. And I remember I met up with a friend at a bar. She was going to have a drink. We are going to maybe have some appetizers or something. But I knew I wasn't going to be. So I had the sparkling water. She had wine or whatever. And at some point she said, would you mind if I ate? I said, oh, no, go ahead. So she's eating an appetizer. The guy sitting next to me is eating his meal. And I was fine because I was just drinking my sparkling water and engaging, talking to them, having a good time. And that was so important for me now when I look back on it, that I did that early on in my experience, because now that's more common for me. I don't alter my fasting schedule because my friends invite us to dinner. I say, I'd love to come over. I won't be eating. And I have 2 friends, they will still set a place at their table just in case I decide to eat. But I just sit there with my coffee or my sparkling water. So that was something that I did experience early on.
I love that, Terri. And interestingly, and I think that we should probably highlight this fact that both of us heard Megan say, treat this like therapy, show up, hell or high water, because I felt the same exact way. And I've noticed that clients that are really successful tend to have that same feeling, because we don't always want to do it, right? Let's talk about that other elephant in the room. We don't want to, we don't feel like it, but we do it anyway because we're able to conjure that discipline because of how desperately we want to reach our goals. But to what you were talking about being able to go out and not eat, I honestly started to feel like that was a superpower, that I could go out into the world where everyone else was eating and I could choose to control my biology in such a way that I would not eat. One of my proudest moments was in the middle of my 6 months of therapeutic fasting. I had a conference scheduled. I was going to Florida, to Disney World, one of my favorite places to go. And I was thinking, well, it's a week-long conference. How on earth am I going to keep up with my therapy whilst on this conference? And I was like, well, I'm just going to. And I did. The thing about these conferences, there's all kinds of included food. And, it's like, well, it's free. Of course you have to eat it. Do you? No. Turns out you don't. And so I would go to the conference meetings. I would go back to my room for lunch and not eat. I would go to the parks, not eat. And it turns out, you can choose not to eat, even if everyone around you is, even if the streets literally smell like hot sugar. So I think sometimes our clients and even us can feel like, oh, well, I had no choice. Got to eat. No, you don't.
That's right. It's so funny. As you got started with that, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to bring up the fact that Heather might have been my only client ever who managed to do, I think it was at the time, 42 or 48-hour fast while in Disney World. And I still put that one out there. So I'm so glad you shared that. That reality, like you said, is it's not only we get used to foregoing meals for us, but we have to do it sometimes in situations where food is the focus. And I think what you're talking about and what I experience is I had to learn to make other parts of the experience the focus. You didn't go to that conference to get free food. You didn't go to Disney World to eat hot sugar. There were so many other things of value in those experiences. And that mindset shift, I think, is golden.
Oh, Terri, say it again. Getting people to separate community, fun, entertainment, learning from food, right? Those are separate things. Yes, food can give pleasure. There's no arguing that. We know that to be true. But it isn't the only thing when you're with other people and when you're on vacation and traveling that provides all of the things that you look forward to. And if it is, that's a little sad, right? I would encourage everyone to be a little bit more creative about what they can enjoy when they're traveling, right? It actually opens your mind a little bit. It's like, well, if eating's off the table, how am I going to have fun? And then you can start to come up with much more interesting things, unique things that maybe you didn't even consider before when that easy one is off the table.
Absolutely. A few weeks before we recorded this, I had the experience of 2 events in 1 week. Now, I was not technically fasting, but it was about events that include dessert. And for me, I'm not eating sugar, so dessert was off the table. And I have reflected on it so many times since then. Not having dessert did not break those experiences for me. It did not make them unenjoyable. I did not go home from my birthday meal thinking, oh, that would have been so good if I had just had dessert. And having the dessert is not why I was celebrating. I was with people I enjoy. We were laughing until we were crying, telling stories and things. Dessert wasn't the issue. Dessert was not going to make it, and it certainly didn't break it by skipping it.
Another thing, Terri, that a lot of times people bring up in the community that I kind of forgot about happening to myself is the idea of having a plateau. And when you're in it, when you're fasting 3 therapeutic days a week and you're on point with your eating, you just expect that scale to move, right? You feel like, look, I'm doing the necessary inputs, and you look down at that scale and it's like, your job is to give me back the information that I'm looking for. I deserve it. I have earned it. Tell me what I want to see. And sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't. And while I was in the middle of those 6 months where, like I said, I showed up like clockwork, there was a 2-week period where the scale did nothing. Now, it didn't do nothing because, as anyone who has some experience fasting knows, the day after you fast, it goes down. And then the day after you eat, it goes up. And it has this zigzag sawtooth pattern, which is a little uncomfortable to experience as it is, but you expect the general trend line to come down. So to have 2 weeks in a row where day after day, you're not seeing any kind of a trend line go down, it can be very unnerving. And the thing is that our bodies are not input-output machines where we can just dial up what we expect out of it and we're supposed to get it out like a computer printout. We don't work that way. Our body has a say. Our biology has a say. So what we can do is show up for our fasts and our eating and our movement and our sleep and manage our stress. But ultimately, our body is going to twist and turn. The hormones are going to adjust, the body composition, the hunger, all of those things are going to work together. And sometimes it just needs a little pause from letting go of the fat so it can reorganize, and then it will start back up again in its own time. And patience is a little necessary, and recognizing that that is just a natural part of the process is necessary. And I think that's why having a coach was so helpful to me. So when I came to you, panicky, okay, Heather, it's all right. Just keep doing what you're doing. This isn't a true plateau, right? 2 weeks isn't even a plateau. We don't need to make any adjustments. We need to ride it out and see what happens before we start to tweak. And sure enough, you get that whoosh, things start moving again, and all systems go. So I encourage everyone that is experiencing that kind of, I don't want to say flat line, right? We don't want to go there, right? This is more of a jaggedy line anyway, but to take a deep breath, be real with yourself. Are you doing what it takes? And if you are, give it a little time. Give your body time to catch up and see.
I love that, Heather. And I think we see this obviously just because it's being measured with people who do weigh themselves every day and sometimes multiple times a day, is that they are watching every bite of food. How did that affect my weight? Every hour I didn't eat, how did that affect my weight? And some people hear us or Dr. Fung say, you could lose a pound during a 42-hour fast. And so they take that as gospel and they say, okay, well, if I'm doing 3 of those a week, that's 3 pounds this week. It's 3 pounds next week. Oh, that's 12 pounds a month. And at the end of the month, when they've lost 4 pounds, they're knocking on our door. Hey, you told me 1 pound each fast. And as you said, it is that jagged line. It's that sawtooth pattern, up and down, up and down, up and down, with an overall decline over time. But if you make or break your decisions based on what the scale says today, you're generally going to get in trouble. I often share this in the community, and I wish I had kept a journal. But I remember when Megan Ramos first told me to do 3 fasts a week. I did it. It was like, okay, Sarge, I'm doing it. And nothing seemed to happen. I don't think the weight was moving at all. Nothing was changing. I just felt like I was doing a lot of hoop jumping for not a lot. And it wasn't until I think maybe around week 4 or so that I started to notice some changes. If I had based my decision about should I keep fasting, is this working for me, on those first 3 to 4 weeks, I would have hightailed it out of there and we would not be having this podcast, or at least I would not be on this podcast with you. So it's really that matter of not expecting that our bodies are just going to perform the way we want them to perform. We're going to keep giving it the right inputs, doing the things that support it, and let it do its job.
Absolutely. One of the things that I like to say is that, your choices are, it's going to go at the pace that it's going to go, and which is probably slower than you want it to, or you're going to quit and you're not going to reach your goals at all. There's no third choice.
I feel like the mic was just dropped. I might have thought there was a glitch in the internet here, but yes, those are the 2 choices. So as you always say, make good choices. All right, Heather, I want to take it down a notch here, get into the parts that aren't so fun to talk about or maybe for some of us are really fun to talk about. I don't know. But I wanted to share that one of the things I certainly experienced, and not just in the beginning of my fasting journey, but for quite a period of time while I was doing a therapeutic level of fasting, and that is experiencing loose stools when I would start to refeed, when I would break my fast right after that meal. I needed to have a bathroom nearby. Sorry, TMI, folks. I should have given a warning ahead of time. But I think this is a really valuable thing for people to kind of accept. There are some troubleshooting things that we can do. But again, when I look back, I wouldn't trade that for anything based on the progress I was able to make. For me, what I realized helped me is to break my fast a little more slowly. Again, this was a little more challenging for me in the beginning because it was like, oh my God, I get to eat again. And it was quick, eat. What can I get in here? And as I learned that seemed to make my loose stools more of an issue, what I would do is try to break the fast a little more gradually. So again, going back to when I was hosting the fasting retreats, we broke a 4-day fast first with just bone broth. Now, 4 days in, you think I could eat a whole side of a cow. what do you mean you're going to give me a cup of bone broth? But it was that real gentle way of reintroducing to the body, getting those digestive juices flowing again. So we started with that. And then we had like a really simple little leafy green salad. And then eventually we had the meal. So it was kind of like maybe a 40-minute process or more from beginning of bone broth until we actually started the meal, just slowing it down a little bit. Now, after a 4-day fast, I think we all still looked at each other across the table to see who was going to run to the bathroom first. But for me, reintroducing food a little more gradually really helped.
So I don't need to belabor the point, but yes, I also had that experience when breaking fasts. I certainly had the loose stool issue, and I know clients talk about it a lot. I just tried to organize my day so that I was in a place where I could take care of business, if you will. And I just accepted it as part of the price that I was paying. And eventually it did resolve for me. You know, I did not have that experience 3 fasts a week for 6 months. Probably a few months in, I was able to break normally and not have any issues. And I know some people run into like some of the foods that they break with, like eggs and fatty meats, can be problematic. And I found that not to be true after a while either. But in the beginning, I tried to follow all those rules. I know some people use chia seeds. The texture kind of weirds me out. So I don't do it, but I've had lots of clients swear by it. So that is certainly something to try. One more thing that we didn't talk about that I think is an important one that I definitely experienced is the disruption in sleep that can come when you first start overnight fasting. You know, so we have these hormones, this like noradrenaline that can pump up a little bit when we're fasting because our body is like, hey, we haven't eaten. We should probably go hunt or look for food or do something to deal with this situation. What's going on? Right. And so you feel that sometimes at 2 a.m, like, hey, maybe I should go do laundry or clean my house or write a book. I don't know. Right. So that high energy state can come at you at night when you're trying to sleep, which is not great because of course we know sleep is a really necessary component for health and to keep our cortisol levels down. And, you know, interference in sleep can certainly lead to hunger. So that can be very frustrating. That is another side effect that did go away after, you know, the first few weeks for me. That didn't perpetuate as my body got used to fasting, got more fat adapted. I was able to rest comfortably. But I know when people first start out, that can be very disruptive. And so sometimes we have to reorganize our lives, right? So, you know, maybe plan those overnight fasts for days before we don't have as many big obligations on the next day. You know, it's hard to fast over the weekend, but sometimes when we're first starting out, that might be a good time. And I wanted to circle back on what you were saying before about whether it's worth it, right? You know, we're talking about all of these things that are a little uncomfortable, but the trade is that what we're getting, that, you know, we're paying these prices. We're paying the price of discomfort for all these side effects, for the discomfort of being at our favorite restaurant and not ordering our favorite thing, being around people and they're all eating what they want and we're making different choices. All of those things are uncomfortable. You know, I'm not discounting that at all. It's a choice we're making. And so if we want these big goals, these big health goals, these weight goals, these clothing goals, how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves, there's a cost to it. And so I know some of my clients are worried about loose skin and some other things that happen as a result of weight loss. And it's like, girl, would you really trade losing 80 pounds so that you didn't have to have loose skin? Like, I really think that people sometimes need to take a step back and say, hey, is a little bit of hunger, a few sleepless nights, some diarrhea, is that worth your goals? I think so. I'll pay that every time.
I was going to say, it's almost now looking back, it's easier to see it, but I wouldn't trade it. I would pay that again gladly. And I, at some level now, when I look back on it, think I'm grateful that they weren't harder consequences that I had to do. And I think back to the discomfort and the consequences if I hadn't done it. You know, being uncomfortable in my skin, even at that meal with people. Now I did it without eating and had to experience that discomfort. But before, I experienced the discomfort of, are they all watching me? Are they all thinking, no wonder she can't lose weight? Look at how she's eating. Like all of this stuff. There wasn't comfort in so many aspects of where I was before I learned this process. And so definitely, you're going to choose your hard, choose the thing. Where are you going to invest doing those things that are challenging for you? 100 pounds heavier or 100 pounds lighter, and the steps it took to get there. So I definitely love your focus on really reflecting on it's worth it to allow yourself to experience the discomfort. None of what we're telling anyone to move into is threatening or intolerable. It's not like we're inviting you to a prisoner of war camp or something. It's really manageable things. But our brains think we should be able to avoid all discomfort. And it works pretty hard to try to achieve that.
I don't even know what to say. That's so perfect, Terri. That whole thing just touched my heart and soul, because that's so true. We can accept the discomfort of change or the discomfort of staying the same. Either way, right? Life is a journey, and there are always choices that we're making, and some benefit us and some don't in the long run. And I always like to think of my future self. Is she looking back on what I am doing right now and feeling proud, or feeling bad about herself and wish she had made other choices?
I don't think there's anything more I could add to that, Heather. That is, again, a priceless mic drop. Every now and then I have to make sure that we haven't lost our internet connection between us. When you say these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. And she's not moving. So I hope that this has been helpful for everyone to get to hear our own experiences in kind of navigating the challenges of fasting. And obviously you can hear in this final part that we just shared the total commitment that we both have, that it was worth it. It was worth every one of those uncomfortable moments. So thank you, Heather, for diving into these things with me. And I look forward to our next time that we record again.
Thanks, Terri. Make good choices, everybody.
Take good care, everyone. We'll be back with another episode next week.